Oh, hey. Nope, I don't work at Insomniac anymore. I left a while ago. Alright, everybody. It is 10:59. I'm going to give it about another minute. People are already throwing stuff in the chat. Yeah. So, another minute and I'll get to work. But just let me know if you guys can't hear me or anything. It looks a little funky. Otherwise. Alright, that's 11. So, part 1 and 2, we kind of came up with these guys. And we did them in Clip Studio, Paint. So, all the line work, all the flatting, the basic flatting, we did in Clip. And I think we talked about painting and bringing over brushes and things like that from Photoshop. And I don't know, week after week, I just never get around to actually bringing my brushes over from Photoshop to Clip, which I'd like to just do a complete start to finish in Clip. But seeing that I got my brushes still set up nicely in Photoshop, I'm going to finish painting this thing up in Photoshop tonight. And then maybe when we do another one of these, we'll just do start to finish in Clip Studio. That'll be another thing. But there is some nice stuff, especially when it comes to robots and stuff like that, that it does make sense to do it in Photoshop, and we might get to some of that tonight. Let's just see how this thing progresses. Hey, Sleeping Dumplings, thanks for coming out. Alright, so let's get some weathering on these guys, which is always kind of the fun thing. And we'll paint them up. And I think we're going to do some basic logos on these guys to kind of give them some of that cool construction-y vibe. Yeah, so I'm going to go through and just label my layers real quick, because once these things start stacking up, I'm going to kind of lose track of them. Some empty layers here too, that's no good. And then because I got kind of a fresh look, I might adjust some of the colors ever so slightly. Hey Casper, thanks for coming out. Alright. So that orange that they are is a little bit on the sort of pink side to me, so I want that a little bit warmer. Actually, that red looks pretty cool too. But I think for tonight, do something like that. Then that's gonna that's gonna conflict with the rust, and then the rust isn't gonna look as interesting. So maybe we go back and we do lean into the red a little. Try something. I'm just goofing off for a second here. I want to try some different things out before we go and commit to anything. Yeah, I'm gonna go construction-y with these guys. So we'll introduce probably another color into these guys. with some of the logos and stuff, but we do need that sort of secondary color. Yeah, like I really like the way that orange works with that yellow, but I know once I add the rust in, that's gonna start to get less interesting looking. And we can always go back and adjust this again later. Let's try something kind of wacky for now. So we'll do kind of like that, and then the eyes. Kind of all over the place right now. Did I? Let's see. Going back to what I started with, and I'm just gonna make it a bit more intense. And we're gonna stay with that. I don't know why I even bothered. Alright. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just do like an overall rust layer, which you guys have seen me do in the past, and I'm only, well, I'll just do it all over, but I'm mostly going to use it only where the paint is, but I can probably add some rust into some of the bare metals as well. So as usual, I'm just going to start with a fill color. Doesn't really matter too much because we're going to paint the crud out of it. And then just grabbing any old noise brush that you have, something that has like a lot of little crackles and things in it. Just start using different kinds of browns and grays and purples and whichever you got, and just start modulating it out so that it has like a nice, interesting old rusty. And it's okay to pick like super saturated colors at first, because those things will get dumbed down. So you can see like this bright orange as I'm sort of like stamping it around. It looks like it's way overkill. But then when I change it, well, that brush is pretty cool. And then I'll just use like more of like a muted gray and just stamp, and then you can see like how it just allows a little bit of that rust, that red rust, to kind of come through. And even this layer, you can always go back and edit as well, like as you're finding things that work, or if there's like exposed areas that once we start painting into it aren't working. Let's see, and then that should probably do it. I'm going to add a little bit of fine noise in it. You'd never really see this, but it's just for my own personal preference. I'm just going to grab like a dotty brush here, something with little specks, and take a dark color and just kind of add in a little less than that. Why am I not painting right now? Alright, here we go. And when, like, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but like they have like these like when I think about like doing these rust layers, there's these landscape photos of like trains and old tanker ships and stuff like that, where, you know, there's like all over like Siberian deserts where there used to be huge vast amounts of water, and they're all dried up now, and these things like have all just like rusted to crud. So I always think about that when I'm painting these areas. Like that's what it would look like if everything rotted away. Okay, that should work. So now I'm gonna pull the eyes up on top, and these bandages. Oh no, it's not gonna work. All right, so for now, I'm gonna mask off everything that is just the paint, and we can always change that. There we go. And then now we're ready to go. So as usual, I start with a hand painted brush, and just start going through some of the edges, the high points, and just start chipping away. And this is just good old fashioned fun, just telling the story of just like how this thing has rotted itself out over the years. And we'll go back as usual with the texture brushes and noise brushes and get some subtle texture in there that kind of complements all this stuff. So I'm just like slowly revealing that, and I can do big chunks, just keep adding and subtracting, going between black and white on the mask, and just get these really cool shapes. Stipple stuff in. I don't know, it's really fun for me. I like doing this part of the process. Hey, Christopher. Thanks, man. I appreciate the compliment. So you can see like it pretty quickly, just by kind of like adding and subtracting. I keep my finger on the X on the keyboard, which cycles between the black and the white and the color swatches, and on the mask. And that way, like, I don't have to stop. I just kind of add, subtract. So like I'm painting in and I'm subtracting back, and you just get these really cool craggies. And you pretty quickly realize like why doing it by hand can work so much nicer than doing the stamp brushes, because the stamp brushes aren't really following the form and following the cross contours of the forms that you've created. They create like a nice overall cohesion, but they don't actually work with the forms. You'd have to do a heck of a lot of work to get like a stamp brush to follow the form that you drew. So you just think about like where the edges are, where the paint's been scraped away. I don't know. I get lost in this stuff, right? Like it starts to become real. You start thinking about like every little scratch, like how someone like crawled up this arm, someone scuffed it with their boot and wore the paint away, or was running through the forest and sticks were slowly smacking on the edges of all the high points and all this metal, taking away the paint. And just the fact that it's old and the paint's going to be faded, which actually I think is something we should do. We should probably, like the paint itself, we'll create like a duplicate layer and we'll bleach it out, and then we'll just slowly ghost in like where some of the high spots, like where the sun has been beating down on this stuff, causing the paint to fade. It always looks really cool. It has a nice kind of believability to it. you think like the feet on these things are probably taking a lot of wear, so they're probably going to have a lot of the paint chipped away. Almost looks like they were walking through mud, but you know, like this is, if you look at like a pretty old piece of construction equipment, the parts that are closest to the ground, they always have the most areas beat up on them. So that kind of like lends to like a little bit of a believability story. And that's something I was mentioning when we were working on flatting this thing. Is like this paint layer, I was really sloppy about it because I knew I was going to go back through and just like cut into it with all this chips and stuff, and so it was a waste of my time to be ultra specific. This is a really satisfying process. Even doing like real models making and stuff like that, this is like one of the most satisfying stages when you really start to weather things. Still looking for little stories to tell. So like that's like my first pass when I'm doing this stuff, is like I just kind of go through and just sort of like hit all the edges. I do, you know, if I really know already, look for a place to put like a big sort of like signature chipped area or something like that, or, you know, like if I wanted to do scratches or something. But I tend to just kind of process it where I'm just, very first thing I do is I get through and kind of do the givens, which is like the definite scratches across all the high points, and then I can go back and find like where I want to have something a bit more dramatic. Just kind of like slowly builds it up rather than just hitting it just as once. And when I go in with the texture brushes, I'll probably be removing a little bit of this stuff and just kind of adding noise to it, which is nice. Kind of like even breaks it up even more and adds, so you get like you get all your like hand painted signature stuff, the stuff that's like really makes it look like it was specific to those forms, but then you again adding like to the consistency of it by kind of unifying it up with those noise brushes. And there are times on certain illustrations, certain concepts, where I won't use a single noise brush, and that's just a preference thing. Sometimes I just feel like sometimes for the style of the piece that I'm working on, it really matters that everything is designed and it's not just stamped in. And then other times when I'm really seeking like more of like believability versus design, then I'll lean on whatever tool is necessary to kind of get that vibe. Yeah, it's just a normal hard brush with some thick to thin on it based on the pressure sensitivity. I'm using less and less custom brushes. Like almost every piece that I'm doing on my Instagram right now is just a simple pencil tool, which just has like a little bit of texture in it. That's just like my favorite drawing pencil, and an airbrush, like a straight up airbrush. Like I'm not using any other painting tools. I just want to see what I can do with like regular tools and not lean on tricks, I guess. It's like where my brain's at right now. The tricks are awesome and you got to know them, but at some point, like there's this like kind of like authorship that I feel like I want to like actually feel like I actually created the entirety of the piece. Kind of goes to like 3D modeling again, as well as I always when people buy kits and kit bash things together, and you know that some of the stuff comes out so amazing, and especially when you're under duress with a deadline or something like that, or you're just trying to come up with some sort of pipeline for a project, stuff is absolutely crucial. But as far as like the sort of like personal goals of like Is it yours? Did you build the entire thing? Could you? Like, can you testing yourself out to see like if you actually have the chops to put that stuff together. So that's why I keep on my personal work, the stuff that I'm really kind of pushing myself and challenging. I always set up like these little challenges, like, okay, no easy tools. Everything is just real basic, and what can you do with the basics? I grew up in that time period where Lego was like 20 different bricks, and you had to build everything out of it. I just love that challenge of coming up with something out of almost rudimentary, simple shapes. But yeah, like, because I think these guys will benefit the most from having some like nice, believable texture on them. You're gonna see like the combination of this kind of like hand chipping and the noise brushes. That just it's kind of like a nice balance of efficiency and believability. It has some really great benefits. I did a lot of my concept work at Insomniac this way because we were very fixated on having like believable materials, which is a big part of that franchise, the Ratchet and Clank franchise. So it was like stylized forms with believable materials. So it was really important to not, stand on some like hallowed ground of I need to do it the artist way in order to satisfy my own needs. It was much more about the project's needs, and so that was a really important understanding of like knowing what's best for your project and not necessarily always leaning into like what is important to you specifically. Just do that on your personal work. Alright, we're just about done doing the hand painted paths. I'll probably still go back and customize this stuff with a hand painted brush, but that kind of gets through and does like an initial pass. So before I get too far, I should have done this before, but I always like to put kind of like a medium gray back here when I'm at the coloring stage. Kind of gives, when you're on white, sometimes it's hard to gauge colors and forms. This makes it just a little easier to see everything. Alright, so now there's hey Kyle, there's a couple of different things you could do here. Like if you're really apprehensive about just painting straight into this, like this mask that we just created with all chip paint, like you could destroy it right now with the texture brushes. So you could, for instance, you could group this again and put another mask on top of this, and then now start chipping away in that, and that can be reserved strictly for nope, that's not the way that's gonna work. Did I do that wrong? Oh, okay, so let's see, I'll drag that mask in and then, oh, that's not gonna work. Let me think that through for a second. Mask that. Oh, okay, so I'm not gonna get a dual reveal. Oh well, okay, so we're just gonna go destructive, so I'm not gonna try and figure that out. So right now I'm just using like some big kind of scratches. I've been using this one for a long time, but it can get really heavy. But you can see like just very quickly, it just sort of like starts working with the hand painted chips. I like it a lot. And then I'm gonna use that same crackle brush I was using to make the rust and just ever so slightly stamp away. So now I'm kind of looking for areas where like the paint is starting to thin and the rust is really starting to show through. So I'm just trying to thin that rust down. I mean, thin that paint down. I'll probably use a couple different kinds of stamps, but because this is a faction and I want the stylization of all this stuff, I have to go through each one and do like I tend to do like a same pass all the way through each one so that I'm I'm not switching to another brush and then forgetting what brush I was on to kind of get that effect. What does that Cintiq do for you that an iPad can't? Just size. I use the iPad for tons of stuff now. I still prefer this pen over the iPad pencil. That pencil that goes with the iPad is, as far as I'm concerned, is it's pretty garbage. It's heavy. The tip isn't quite as responsive. But once you get used to it, it's no big deal. It's not. It really has nothing really bad about it whatsoever. But the Cintiq is just like scale, and the fact that it's linked into a really powerful PC that an iPad just can't do a lot of the stuff that I do. But the number one thing is just the scale, working at this scale. If they made a bigger iPad, oh my god, I'd buy two. For no reason, just because it's awesome. Let's see, some other. This one's a bit more dramatic with chip. It looks pretty cool sometimes. So, like nice big rust areas. And you can see like I'm already starting to lose some color contrast with the red and the rust, so I'm gonna remedy that in a second. And then I've got this brush that's really just like noise, and just use that to kind of thin it down, thin areas down. So we've got our rust in pretty good shape now. Find a couple of key scratches we can put in there. And then, so we talked about like the color contrast real quick there. I don't like how like that rust is so red right now, so I'm going to darken it. I'm not going to I'm just going to look at it in context. So I'm just desaturating, slowly lightening it, darkening it, seeing where it fits. I don't want to go too dark because it'll get really harsh. And then now you can see like how these, like having different colors would work on that. And this kind of goes towards like why I like to keep all the layers separate, because now I can go through and just tweak that color. And see, just by making it like yellow, which is a sort of a brighter value by default, it's just to pop a little bit better on that rust. So I like this brown. Like I like, as a palette, I like the sort of like simple palette on that. But if you were making a game, like like the kinds of games that I'm used to making, it's much more appropriate to have like some nice color distinctions on the forms. So try doing something like that, but that looks awful. I know I'm futzing around in like this like one little area here, because we could even do something like really dramatic where we like make it like a caterpillar color like that. But what I think I want to do is kind of take that same idea but use purple, but keep the saturation really low. And then we'll make the eyes just a little bit more green. Now I'm starting to feel that. I think that's pretty cool. And then I don't like the red. I think that's going to be, we'll go back towards purple on those. Okay, I like that. So now let's get the sun bleaching in. So you can imagine like these things have been like out in the yard, just getting beat on by the sun for 50 years or something. So the quick and dirty way to do this is to just grab both your painted areas. I'm going to duplicate them and merge them together, and then I'm just going to level them a little bit brighter. Take some of the saturation out of it. So that we can imagine is like what the sun would ultimately do to the paint job. I'll throw a mask on that. And now I'm just gonna use like a soft brush, just a normal soft airbrush, and I'm just gonna imagine where the tops of these objects have been facing the sun the most. Just sort of slowly reveal it in. Stamp it in a little. You can see how like immediately it starts to, the tops of these shoulders just a little lighter. Suddenly it looks really old. It's just a cool technique to make it look like all these like nice painted areas have kind of seen their time. Alright, that's cool. And now we'll do our grease strips, all the sooting all in one pass, because we still got to do the metal. So I'm thinking like the metal is probably a little too light. So I think our base metal is going to go darker. And then our darks are going to go even darker. That's looking more construction-y already. And I'm not really afraid of going that dark because I think the highlights and things like that are going to help that a lot. Okay, and so now I'm going to duplicate this rust layer. I'll just start with a new mask. And we can use this for our metal, so first things first, let's get it masked off properly. And we'll take the paints. Get rid of those. So you can see like this would be like if all the metal stuff underneath was already rusted, like fully rusted, which looks pretty cool. But I don't want it to be that rusted. And I also think I want it to be just a little bit darker. So this is doesn't really follow any logic, it's more of a design thing. And now I can do the same thing. I'm going to mask this off. And then I can just slowly start bringing some of that rust in. So I'm going to do something in reverse like I just did before, where I'm going to grab my noise brushes. You can just see how like it doesn't really matter which way you do it, but I do tend to do the kind of scratch layer first, especially when it's paint, because I want the paint specifically to be scratched away, but with the rust it's not as crucial in my mind. So I'm just gonna slowly start finding areas to let the rust come through. And then I'm gonna go back and kind of start telling the story of like how the rain has sort of dripped and caused some patterning, patinas. This part does a lot for the look of them. So I'm just going to go back to like a soft brush, and I'm going to, out of these holes down here, maybe I'll drop the opacity a little, where some rust is start to form out of these holes. This is the same place I would put grease and stuff, but like, you know, like around the bottoms of these holes and these stacks where rain has had its way. What's going on there? Oh, that's interesting. Hang on a second, I gotta fix this mask. I loaded the wrong layer when I was making up the complex selection, so it added some areas, or blocked off some areas. So like you just kind of look for areas like where like rain and water would kind of like sit or drip and accumulate and cause rust. That way it has a sense of believability. Like in these crevices and things. And the rust and the sooting layer, which I'm going to do a sooting pass in the next part, they tend to be in similar areas. Like rust tends to like get into the crevices just like the soot does. You can think of soot like ambient occlusion, where it kind of like finds its little hiding spots. But rust can tell more of a story. Well, I don't know. Now I'm debating myself. I think soot and grease and things like that could probably tell a pretty cool story as well, but equal rights. Okay, so that's that. So now for the grease, soot, oils, things like that, I don't really have to do much more than I'm just going to duplicate my base layer, which is like already like a deep gray. I think I'll start labeling these again. So I'm going to call this grease. And I'm going to multiply that on top of everything. And we'll just make it a little bit on the warm side. And a little lighter. And now we can start just like having grease drip out of these vents. Kind of accumulates in the seams a little bit. Maybe it's make sure that's in the right place in the layer stack. You know, in his face, there's grease dripping down that vent, and the tips of these smokestacks definitely want to make it look like it's sooted and darkened from just use. Oh, Casper, I'm going to do the brushes next week. I just want to finish this thing off. It's just taken 3 weeks to do all this stuff, so. But yeah, I think next week I'm just going to draw up a robot or something like that, so we have like some default thing. I'll get it like mostly prepped, and then I'm just going to make some rust brushes and show you like how easy it is to make them. But this guy's been going on for 2 weeks already now, so I just wanted to get this wrapped up. And I think this night should do it, I hope, unless something catastrophic happens. So this is kind of like, you know, you can be kind of sloppy here, but it's nice to think about like where things are dripping, where the crevices are that are filling up with grease and dirt. Especially wheels, wheels are just constantly getting gunked up. And I'm only using like one value of dark gray, like warm dark gray to do all this grease. You could definitely hand paint in a lot of stuff and make it look a little bit more interesting that way. Alright, so that's a pretty decent rust pass. So the last thing we can do before we go on to shade these things is probably do some logos. And so this will be not as interesting as making a brush, but I wanted to show you guys a trick. So here we go. So I'm going to make a triangle. So to make an easy triangle, you just set your poly tool to 3-sided. Gotta get that out of this one. Right, so this is gonna be my logo layer. These are gonna be painted off the models a little bit. So right now it's set to star. Now it's a triangle. Okay. So just flipped it horizontally instead of vertically. Okay, so one trick to getting like rounded edges is to use your stroke tool on the outside and then just increase the size. And so what's happening, I mean, it does get kind of chunky at the corners, you can see, but what it's doing is it's trying to do an even stroke all the way around that point, and so it creates an arc. So that's a pretty quick way to kind of get some rounded corners. And the nice thing there is I can do this. You can have multiple strokes. So I can never get this order right, but let's see if I can do this right. Okay, so that's the backwards one. So this one I'm going to make white again. This one I'm going to make black. And then I'll just reduce that size. And play with the sizes until they look about right. And then I'll do some sort of logo on these things. I think I'm going to use like an electrical symbol or something. So let's see how we do. Okay, so I think I want the borders a little thicker, so go back to the stroke. Don't forget your sound effects. Alright, and here's where it starts to get kind of fun. So this is, I'm going to group this in as the triangle logo. I always like to create a backup in case I want to change something. Because I'm going to merge these together, and that's going to bake in those layer effects that created the strokes. So it's just so it's just this now. And then, well, actually, I can do both these. Check this out. All right, so now I'm going to convert these to a smart object. So now everything that I just painted is actually like a mini PSD, a mini Photoshop document inside of this Photoshop document. And when you get to this stage, if your file's too big, definitely save a lot. Okay, so if I double click on this, if you guys haven't messed with it, it creates a separate Photoshop document. And so you can see here, if I were to turn off the lightning bolt and hit save, it updates it on the previous file. Turn it back on, save it, there it is. If I move it, anything I do in this Photoshop file, if I were to do this, it's going to update it over there. Put it back, updates it over there. So I'm going to close this, and now, because this is a smart object, when you do a transform on it, it can't rasterize the transformations, so it keeps all of the transformations live. So I'm going to do a distort. Actually, I gotta duplicate this first. And duplicate it again. Okay, so now I needed 3 of them, so we'll do one at a time. Transform, distort. And I don't even really need to worry about how specifically correct they are right now, because normally when you commit to a transform, then that's it. But with this, anytime you hit transform again, it's going to go back and go. So if I want to transform that now, again, and I go back to distort, it's going to bring up the same handles, and I can just go right back to working. So that's neat, but then here's another neat part. So I can already see like that border is starting to get really thin. So I'm going to increase the size of that border. And it updates them on all of them, right? So as I continue to work, and add them to the different robots, and then this one. So you can see the power of this, especially when you're doing like a team where they all have to share logos. Okay, so let's say now I'm going to turn off. Is that one? Yeah, okay. I think I'm just going to delete it from those, because I don't need that paint anymore. So now, just throw those in as logos. And even better, I'm going to put them inside the group of paint that is, or underneath the rust, so that all the rust and oil and stuff that we put on it starts to affect them a little. And then I can go back in to any one of these, and let's say I want to make the background try something dramatic. see what this looks like. So it just updates all the logos simultaneously. I don't know if that is blowing your minds, but it is a really cool way. So I'm just going to make that outer border a little bigger, so I need the canvas to be a little bigger. Cool. And then I can go through on that overall layer and just kind of chew it up a little. And still, all this weathering that I'm doing on top of it, it's all like non-destructive because it's just a mask over the top. And as soon as I start putting this like chipping into the logo, they sort of come alive. But I can still go back and decide if I want to make the logo blue at any time. So all this nice chipping goes in. Wear marks and grease dripping over it, and then I say, you know what, I really want that logo to be blue. Open it back up, change the color to like a teal, say save that, it just updates it. And there we go. So you can do that with a faction, you know, like if something has like the same something or other over and over and over, it's a really great opportunity to make sure that like everything stays consistent. And again, everything is live. All right. Why does that look so funny? What am I missing here? That looks weird, right? I don't know. Maybe it doesn't. Okay, so the eyes, I definitely want them to be darker. So like we're gonna make them glow and have reflections and all this stuff. So I always start with a much darker green, which, as I've talked about in the past, gives you somewhere to go versus like already being as bright as they are. So let's darken those up. Okay, and so then let's start shading these things. So I'll put my ghost layer above all that. This will be my shading group. I know I'm just repeating myself of stuff you guys have seen me do before, but so just see a little bit of these guys. And then shadows. So I'm just going to start, I think I am going to start with just like a deep gray. So it's real easy to see. And we can always adjust the color later. Set it to multiply. Shadows are going to use the same overall mask as the base layer. Cool. Alright, so invert that mask and start painting. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to use smart objects now. I like the potential that they have in concept art specifically. All right, so I guess we'll start with this guy. Try to decide which direction I want the light to come. Alright, I think I'm going to do the light from the top right. Because I've already kind of established that with the arms being shaded in down here and stuff. So I'm randomly just going to start with the guy in the middle. Yeah, smart objects are kind of like they're like an evolution from After Effects with all the nested comps and stuff. But the fact that it's all live is incredible. So I'm just gonna go through. I think the nice thing about rendering robots, even though it's absolutely tedious, is everything is compartmentalized. So there's like just make a selection off of pieces. And yeah, I'm probably gonna get quiet every once in a while. I apologize, but just shading is a little bit like doing math problems. So I'm just gonna go through and sort of establish general lighting. And I'm just gonna ignore the light logic of the eyes themselves because I'll probably get to them. I'm gonna do some custom work on those later. So it's not worth worrying about shading them perfectly. That's the lenses, I mean, not the actual frames around them. This is where things like really start to feel volumetric and feel like they exist in real space, so pretty fun. The main reason I think the smart objects is important for anybody who is doing concept work is just the non-destructive qualities of them. Like you just like I was doing with the color switching at the beginning, you have to practice setting up your files to be editable as possible, so that you can constantly be making changes. Every single client I've worked with has always had changes, and if you're set up to just make those changes quick, not only do you create better work, create better relationships, you're fast, there's nothing a client likes less than the artist that they hired hemming and hawing about how everything that they did was baked down and permanent. And there's a part that sometimes you have to do that to your work, especially depending upon your style, but you owe it to yourself so you don't go insane when they ask for changes. set it up as customized as possible. Alright, I'll stop being an old man. Just get back to making robots. See why when I was complaining about my bad habit of shading things ahead of time with the inking, it comes back to bite me at this stage. Like if there was anything I needed to change, that would be a total beast. It goes against like everything that I just said about making sure your stuff is editable. But I really like doing it. So for my own work, I really like putting it in. I don't recommend it. Big part of this stage too is just making sure that whoever you're going to hand it off to next, whether it's like a modeler or whoever, a client, this really helps them understand how the forms work. But boy, does shading ever sell something to a client. It's funny. You can have the best design in the world and you put good highlight on it. Also not. I think you're the most amazing artist. I am being a little sloppy tonight, but I think you're going to see why if I'm planning this right. You can definitely be as neat and clean as you want to be with this stuff. But because we have all the rust and everything like that, and these shadows aren't going to be that dark as I'm making them right now, it's not going to be quite as noticeable that it's sloppy. So that way, we're not spending all of our evening just... What I'm looking for is like really dramatic cast shadows that are really helping turn the forms in interesting ways. So that guy is pretty close to just being perfect already. I'll just do like a little pass on him where he gets some more volume. The highlights are going to do a lot of the heavy lifting on this stuff. It's a funny thing to say about a construction tool. this is nice because I'm just going to cast a shadow across the top of that. So like that'll show up nice in the final piece. So that's important to kind of get a little accurate. But then like some of the smaller details, like how sloppy I'm being about like filling in this like cast shadow on the top of the wheel. I'm gonna put money on it that it's not gonna be noticeable when I'm done. Again, just looking for like cast shadows to kind of help set the form, volumetric stuff, but not going too crazy. So I'll just give you a preview. Like so, like now I'm gonna turn that off, and I'll probably make the shadows about this value. You see like all that, like all the kind of like messy areas, like you don't even notice them. So it does have to follow pretty good light logic, but you don't have to go and be like computer accurate. Unless that's your bag. Like this tall guy, I'd like to have a toy of this guy. So I'm just Just trying to figure out all the little shaded areas. This guy has such a big head that a lot of these parts up here are probably going to end up in shadow. So we'll probably end up using like a kick light or something like that to kind of bring some of that stuff back up. So as usual, if you guys are working on anything that you guys want other people to take a look at, throw it in the chat. So even people who are maybe watch this thing later can go check it out, see what you guys are up to. Anybody working on anything cool? Quiet tonight. Alright, I'll shut up and paint. Roger goes loony. Is it your own idea, or is that like on a studio's project? Anybody gonna do the March of Robots challenge this month? Oh jeez. Is that, I assume that's like, is that like a fan fiction thing, or is that like being I want to know. What is that? How it's definitely it's pretty dark stuff. I'm not going to go nuts on the shading in this thing because I think we're going to get a lot more out of the next stage. Got to see I can't remember the guy's name. The guy that does the voice of Roger Rabbit. I got to see him perform in LA a comedy show where he did the voice a lot. He did a bunch of the set in Roger Rabbit's voice. It was so awesome. Strange but awesome. Okay, so I'm going to use that as my shading pass. Figure out our color. So, probably go a little bit on the purple side. Yeah, tie into the purple in the paint, I guess. Alright, that'll work. And then for the highlights, let's grab all of our flats. Duplicate that, merge it, and then so we'll see here. So you guys have seen me do this in the past. Alright, so now we can start bringing up our highlights. If anybody hasn't seen me do that before, just tell me and I'll explain it. But the creator of Roger reposted it. Oh, that's awesome. I'll slowly start bringing up the highlights, and they're gonna look pretty airbrushy at first, but that's just this part of the stage. We'll go back and start adding in the chips and things to them in a second. This process definitely requires you to have a lot of faith, because it ends up looking like absolute trash for a while. Well, it like goes back and forth. Like you think you got it, and then you lose it, and then you got it again, and you lose it. It's hilarious. It's good. It's good for morale. Gotta love the morale. Slowly start bringing up the rubber and the metals. See, I'm not going like fully white or anything like that. Just want to kind of bring it up slowly. We're going to go back with some brighter highlights. And every once in a while, just remember to chip back into your highlights so that doesn't feel quite so perfect. And that starts to bring it to life. So what's kind of fun sometimes is to take this highlight layer and do a shift on the color just ever so slightly. Just kind of like makes it so it seems like the reflected qualities of the paint are doing something slightly different than the actual chromatic color, the look color of it. Alright, now I'm just going to go through and pop in some sort of like nice little highlights here and there. And these are just like little catch lights to kind of forgot these hoses tonight. Three characters, a lot to maintain. Alright, back. I don't know what I was saying, but just go through and just kind of pop little things here and there. Get them looking really special. Yeah, I'm glad you're getting something out of it. This process is, I don't know, I hope it saves some time, saves the headaches anyway. I do consider this more of a way of working with like clients and stuff like that. Not always the way I would work on my own stuff. And there's a lot of things we could be doing tonight on these guys that just keep pushing them further and further into more and more rendered, but really think it adds too much in this scenario. I think what we're doing tonight is selling the idea of this faction. Brighten up that purple ever so slightly. Alright, so now let's do the eyes. So start by darkening the tops a little bit. It's really dark. Let's go a little lighter than that. There we go. Happy little eyes. Then create the light source. Little reflected light hitting the bottom lens is whether that exists or not, I don't know. Do a very subtle reflection. So easiest way to do this is just chew out the bottom here. A final little cartoony highlight. Suddenly it's made of glass. What? Okay. Then on top of everything, on top of the line work, we do our post group. Set the glows on these things. I think I'm going to keep those a little dim, and then I'm going to create like a shaft of light coming out of these things, like a flashlight. interesting. Yeah, that looks cool. And then we gotta get those purple lights going. Just a little bit, I think. Cool. Alright, next up, let's do a quick background and then we'll do some kick light. I'm just going to do my sort of standard foggy background layer here. Alright, so these guys need some drop shadows too, I think. So these are always a little bit tricky, but gotta do them. So start off with the close. And then probably do it with a soft brush, be easier. There we go. And then start casting back. Alright, and then do some smoke coming out the stacks. I know I'm kind of dancing around doing that reflected light, but I'll do it in a second. And what else we gotta do? Fuck it, light. Alright, so just start getting in a little bit of reflected light. And the last thing that's kind of fun to do is throw on some sort of like unifying color layer, something like that, to kind of set a little bit of a mood. So we can just do it simply, just a solid color. Usually you start kind of like a middle gray, but then give it a little bit of color and then just set that to overlay. It just kind of unifies it, but you can see how garish it gets really fast, so gotta be careful. But it kind of gives it a little something something. Cool. And I think that is it for these guys. I'm sure I could just keep tweaking, but if I was going to present an idea for a faction to a studio, I think this would get the idea across. Does anybody have any questions before I save it up and jettison from this stream? Will this be up on Gumroad? It can be. If anybody wants it, I need a few thumbs up on it though to go through the trouble of doing it. I know you got one thumb at least. But if anybody else wants to have this on Gumroad, it usually takes me about 20 minutes after I shut off the stream and I just go and dump it up there, but you let me know. Thanks, Alex. Tried a couple different tones here. You can go warmer, green, like toxic. See how it sets the mood. That looks pretty cool. Kind of murky. Alright, that's 2 thumbs up. If I get one more thumbs up, I'll throw up on Gumroad. I'll do it anyway, but just knocked Hogarth down. Sorry, Hogarth. Alright. Yeah, you can do all kinds of things with this. Just a tone. You know, like getting it real warm like that. You know, if that's the vibe you want. Pretty nice way to kind of like set the mood at the end. It kind of like ties it all together. It's like spaghetti sauce. Kind of makes the whole meal. Alright, I will save this up and throw it on the gum road, and then we'll get into making some of these, because I've wanted to make some new ones anyway. So, yeah, next week I'm going to do the making like 2 or 3 chip brushes and just figure out like what's going to work, what'll look cool. What happened up there? What is that? There's a little thing sticking off his head. Hold on. Is that the smoke? I don't know what that is. Hold on. I do. Yeah. So, somehow I got the smoke going up there. That's right. Let's get that cleaned up. Goodbye. Usually I don't notice that stuff till after I post it. Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it, Casper, very much. Alright, well then I will see you guys next week. We'll make brushes, we'll make robots, and in the meantime, do the like, subscribe thing, kind of keep the channel going, and check out Gumroad in like 20 minutes or something like that, and there'll be a nice clean file of everything that we worked on. But as always, thanks for hanging out with with me. I'm by myself. Yeah, have a good night, you guys. I really appreciate it. I will see you guys next week.